off what Kelly just said of why this connection is so important. I'm a healthcare practitioner, a chiropractor by profession, and I've left clinical practice because what I saw was that this conversation is actually more pivotal to the shift in people's health than what I could do physically for them. Like it was so profound that I'm like, I need to lay that down. Because even if I spoke into this and what was being created for them, especially people who were had chronic illness, I saw a lot of people who have autoimmune illness, which I continue to work with. But this conversation is totally different than what is happening in the broader community. And I tell you, it is transformative. It is something you see for yourself. So it's like the teaching someone to fish versus giving them the fish, which was always my thought in healthcare anyway. And it's like when you have it for yourself, I'm no longer the advice giver, because even as a doctor, and you guys could probably relate, I've had doctors tell me, the doctor tell me what to do. And I was like, yeah, okay, thanks. You know, like, so this is different because when you see it for yourself, you have it. And it's a beautiful way. It's empowering. It's connecting. There's deep connection. And I think there's just more healing available in this conversation. So thank you, Kelly, for bringing this together and that we're a part of it. Thank you.
Thanks for being here with me. Thanks for being the first to go. Who else would like to share about their experience or any experience for that matter, no matter what it is, where you're from? I'm just going to welcome, hello, Barbara Wallach. Welcome to the room. We've got Cheryl. I noticed you're unmuted. Would you like to share? Yeah, please do. Welcome. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and thanks to Barb Wallach. Carrie, I so appreciate what you just said. I'm a professional intuitive and an ordained minister of metaphysics, and I too love to work with people around mindset. And I recently had a profound out-of-body experience that is so in alignment with what Sydney Banks talks about, and I'd never heard of him. Happened to phone Barb yesterday, found out about you guys, and just had to be here today. I'm really called to step more into supporting leaders who are really trying to make big change in the world. And so this whole idea of trusting your intuition, leading from peace, leading from kindness, there is, I believe, for all of us, this great calling that we're all listening to. And I think when we come together like this, we are grounded even more in the strength of following that calling. So, Kelly, I know nothing about you except I'm just so in love with what you're doing, and glad to meet this new community.
Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Barbara. Barbara's a friend of mine. And thank you for sharing the message, because that's the only way this gets heard, is by word of mouth. And I'm a firm believer of personal connection. And a lot of the people anybody who's reached out to me or that has been in the room knows that I'm one for sending that little direct message or that hello or that thinking of you today kind of thing. And I think at these times that's what people are needing, that one-to-one situation. So thank you, Cheryl, for being here and celebrating connection with us. Would anybody else like to share?
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Nikki. Please do.
So, I was just interesting listening to the previous two because my story's kind of similar, really. I'm a qualified psychotherapist and I kind of worked in the psychology field for about 12 years. And the reason that I got into that was because I suffered myself. And, I had periods in my life where I was okay and I functioned, and I had periods in my life where I didn't leave the bedroom. I was so depressed. And so I kind of have been on this really long journey and tried everything. I tried everything in order to try to fix myself. And then 3 years ago, I heard Dr. Bill Pettit say, never broken, nothing to fix. And I heard the spiritual truth in that. And so the last 3 years have been a journey of seeing that for myself, and now having a conversation about that with my clients. And the work I do now is just beautiful, because when I work with clients, I can see that they're sitting in the middle of innate mental well-being. And I never saw that before. And so it's just joyous and beautiful. And yeah, I just want to, like you say, just want to talk to as many people as I can talk to.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah.
I'm really feeling that, because there's that place where once we see it for ourselves, then that foundation is that red thread that flows into everyone else. And it doesn't matter what industry, you know, that we come from. It matters not that you're in, you know, the wellness industry, or you're in the business of selling cars. What I've noticed, Nikki, and you might contest to this, is that what I've noticed is that it doesn't matter where we come from. It's that we hold that space within ourselves, and then that just comes out to whoever we're in front of in whatever we're doing. Yeah. Thank you so much for that share. I appreciate that. And I'm so glad to hear that you're in amazing wellness, living wellness. Would someone else like to share? I just want to welcome Nicholas and Natasha. Great to have you back again. Joe, lovely to have you. Janelle, great to have you. Janelle, do you want to share a little bit? Are you open to sharing this morning? Janelle runs a beautiful group in Canada, which I'm supporting. And hi, morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Great to see you again.
Wonderful. Good to see you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, what thoughts? Is there a particular direction to share in, or?
Maybe just share about your group and some of the things that you're offering, or maybe your insights that you've seen having been in the principles.
Oh, sure. I've been around the principles since about 2013. I was one of those people that had a huge insight and then just completely changed my perception of how I experience life. And it wasn't all smooth sailing since then. I still have had my ups and downs and my experience of my personal humanity, but such a difference from the way I experienced life before. So it's been a beautiful ride. And since that experience, I've gone to lots of conferences and taken all sorts of training. My background used to be in corporate facilitation, and I decided to leave the corporate world, and I've been working mostly in community with dealing with individuals with homelessness and addiction and trauma, a variety of things like that. And I host a monthly hangout. It's with Karen Miller Williams, who's been around the principles way longer than me. And it's just a very formal hangout. It's basically an excuse for Karen and I to get together and see each other once a month.
Love it. Love it.
And anyone that wants to join the conversation with us can. So we choose a topic, and sometimes we talk about it and sometimes we don't, depending on who joins us. And yeah, it's just a casual get together to look in this direction, kind of hang out and share a little bit of love, I guess. And otherwise, I do a bit of coaching on the side and a variety of things. So,
would you mind typing the information in the chat for us so that some people could make
sure.
it? Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, Janelle and I had a nice chat around this understanding earlier in the month, and we got to know each other a little bit better. And you know, everybody, I want to celebrate anybody who's doing anything, because it's about It's about the message, and you're spreading it in a loving way, and I thank you for your service for that. Thank you so much, and
Oh,
thank you.
you're very welcome.
Great to see you again. I'm going to do a shout
Good
out.
to see you too.
Yeah. I'm going to do a shout out to Joe. Lovely to see you. Tracy Nole. Lovely to see you. My Uncle Ron is in the room. Lovely to see you, Ron. Great to have you from good old Eastern Canada. Rick, lovely to have you back. And who else do we have? Okay, so we're about 10 minutes out. I'll just say to anybody who's here for the first time, thank you so much for coming. These are complimentary conversations, but I call them labors of love because in the latter part of December, I decided that there wasn't a very large message in Canada around the principles, and I had been working with a beautiful small group for a year and realized that they were really seeing transformation and they were making changes in their world that they hadn't necessarily seen before. And so I wanted to bring this larger group together for the purpose of spreading the message, getting one-to-one in conversation, and asking some of the originals, some of those that have gone long before us, to share and tell their stories and bring that message back home to Canada where it originated from. And so my name is Kelly Mabel, and I am here as a labor of love as well. I am a coach, ICF certified coach, and I facilitate small groups in business coaching, as well as the underbelly of those conversations has the three principles in it. And I also teach the three principles as well. And so I wanted to bring more of the message to people that have not heard mind, consciousness, and thought, which are the foundation for the principles. And it is through my pleasure of reading many books that Sydney Banks, the founder of the three principles, you'll notice on the page you signed up on, which is kindmindacademy.ca, the information there was about Cindy Banks. And if you took the time to read it, you would find what happened to a very simple man, a welder with a grade 9 education, and how Sydney Banks transformed his own life, and the epiphany that he had, and the experience of a small town man moving into being an international global speaker to the world in a very short period of time. And his message is here with us all today, for those of you who have seen and heard it and felt it deeply. And his message carried me into a feeling of peace and serenity at a time where, I was going through COVID and an identity crisis and some things around leaving my job and not really knowing what the heck I was doing. And I fell into some depressive states, and I knew that the principles could support me. And I just needed to change my view, see something new, go back to where I had learned this process the first time. And so, unbeknownst to me, I started asking some of those beautiful people to join me in conversations just like this. And I started asking all of you to join in and be a part of this. And this wouldn't be happening if you weren't here. So first off, I want to celebrate the fact that you've come for yourself, and that we're here for the principles, and that Sydney Banks had a message. And, I'm only the conduit of that information. I'm just that little bit of a light bulb that shines the light on what he had to say and the processes and understandings that he brought to the world many years ago. And who you're going to meet today is Jan and Chip Chipman. Now, Jan and Chip changed their entire life after they got together with Sydney Banks. And Sydney Banks' story started on a little small island called Salt Spring. And it's about an hour away from me here in Vancouver, British Columbia. And that message is very much alive, although Elsie Spittle and Jan and Chip and a few other practitioners that live on Salt Spring don't really want their peace and quiet disrupted. So if you go over to Salt Spring, you won't really know that people know about Jan and Chip or Elsie or the message of Sid, because they kind of like living in peace over there, which is why they chose that little island. But what you will find out and what you'll hear today is this larger message of truth, the truth that we all know carries itself. And that truth continues to grow greater and greater and greater in the grandest of ways all over the world. And it's the message of the principles, which is the understanding of mind, consciousness, and thought. And so this is a creative experiment by me, and you're all in it. I've been just creating it moment to moment, and it just keeps becoming a beautiful experience of feeling. And what you'll find when Jan and Chip get here is that Jan and Chip became almost the best friends to Sydney Banks. And back in the day, in the 80s, when these types of messages were growing, they started in small rooms. And in smaller rooms, people would come and they would listen to a speaker talk about their experience. And so they started listening to Sid. And that message started to transform the way they heard and saw things in the world. And they would take that home to their husbands and their children and their family. And it began to grow. And what happened for Jan was that their marriage began to change. And Chip was like Elsie, if those of you who are here that heard the Elsie conversation, Chip was not into it. It wasn't really something he was going to buy into. And he had a big refute around what that was going to be. And he was still trying to play in the game him and Jan had played their whole lives in their marriage, which was from the past. But Jan had seen something different. And she started to bring a new woman home. And that woman wasn't being triggered or reactionary to the conversation of what they used to do. And so they changed their marriage. And I think it's 51 years now later, they were upon the brink of divorce. And they changed their marriage. And they too began to be global speakers around the world. They started to come to a new realization for themselves. And they began the conversations in prisons. And they began the conversations in treatment houses. And with people who had mental wellness that was one thought away. And one conversation at a time, they built the message of mind, thought, and consciousness in cities all over the world, which they're still doing today. And I found them at a little school, the Three Principles School on Salt Spring. And I had the pleasure of visiting them 3 times in that experience, where Elsie and Jan come together and they share the principles. But more importantly, they share the feeling of being connected to an understanding that supports, in the grandest of ways, what you might not have seen yet. And so I'd like to take a minute and welcome the newcomers to the room. And I know that Jan and Chip, they thought they were going to have a power outage last night, so they phoned me in a bit of a state saying, "Oh no, can you please give us the dial-in because we're not going to have any power for the computer." And yet the divine worked all that out for us, and they didn't have their power outage. So they're going to be here live, which is a beautiful thing. So I just want to celebrate some new people in the room. I'm going to say hello to my friend Joe and my friend Veronica and my friend Hy-Vee and Rick. Great to have you back. Marty. I've got Marty, but it doesn't look like Marty. Marty Lipsky. But Marty's here. Hello, hello, hello. Great to have you both. Karen Angelucci, love you to see you, my friend. And I've got Gabrielle. Hello, Gabrielle. Great to have you. Rosalia, lovely to have you, my friend. And let's see who else we have. I'm going to spin the page here. I've got Tracy Leong. Lovely to have you, my friend. Anna Saunders. Great to see you. Great to see you. Shona, lovely to have you back. Shauna Clark, my dear friend. Great to have you. And I'm looking at Christine Dela Cruz, Malgorzata. Who else? Helen. And I've got Barbara Jones in the room. Welcome, Barbara. Morag, great to see you back. My dear friend Morag from Nelson, BC. Great to have you. So we're just going to wait for Jan and Chip to come. And if anybody would like to say hello live, please do. Ashley Long's coming in. Who would like to say hi?
I'm just wondering if there was anyone who needed to kind of know what mind, consciousness, and thought is before they come in, or will Jan and
Chip are gonna. I'm gonna save that for them. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, just making sure.
No, thank you. Yeah, there'll be a beautiful unfoldment of the principles, and so I would love it if let's see a raise of hands for those who. Oh, here comes Chip. For those who are in Canada. Who's in Canada here? Yeah, okay, great. And what about the UK? Who's in the UK? Beautiful. Welcome, all you beautiful Brits. I love having you. And who is from elsewhere? Elsewhere in the room. What do we have? Please raise your hand. Would anybody be willing to share? Where are you from? Where are you from?
Sharon.
Sharon, where are you at?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm from Martha's Vineyard, which is an island off Massachusetts in the US.
Beautiful, and I love you here.
So happy to be here. I love listening to Chip and Jan, and I'm so excited. And thank you for bringing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Shona, thank you, Sharon. Shona, where are you from?
Hi, I'm from Toulouse in France.
Ah, bonjour. Very fabulous.
I'm actually originally from the UK, but I've lived here for a while.
Terrific. Well, I won't hesitate one more second. We have the beautiful, I've got to find you, Chip Chipman in the room. Where are you? I know you're here. Where are you? There they are. Hang on. I see them. Just a second. They're on the other screen. I've got to find them. Hello, my lovely friends. Welcome to the room. You guys are on mute currently.
They have to unmute.
There we go.
There you are. Welcome. So great to have you. And live. We thought maybe there would be a power outage, but you're here live with us. It's so great. So great. I'm going to turn you on to speaker view. And I am going to turn the room over. So I've just been sharing a little bit about your experience, of course, being on Salt Spring, and how I had the opportunity of meeting you both personally at the little school on Salt Spring. And I attended 3 times and had profound insights, and more importantly, that beautiful feeling, that absolutely beautiful feeling that you both create when we're there. And rather than reading a bio from a book, or some of the details or the letters behind your name, I thought it would be a beautiful thing if each one of you would like to just share your information from your heart or your wisdom, because wisdom, as we know, always guides the room. And I have to say, Jan and Chip did me the pleasure of driving me to the ferry after we had the little school last time, and I just had such a beautiful feeling being in the car, driving off this little island, getting back onto the ferry to come back to the mainland. And I said to them, I know I'm going to see you again. Now, I didn't think it would be in Hollywood Squares, but here we are.
All right, Hollywood Squares.
So lovely to have you, and I turn the room over to you, my dear friends.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly.
That's the ultimate Salt Spring experience, getting a ride to the ferry.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Thank you for having us, and it's so beautiful to see all these beautiful faces, some of whom we recognize.
Some we know. Hello, Khalifa.
Yes. And we won't say who we recognize, but
there we go.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that Kelly started out talking about the feeling. You know, it's something that runs through as a thread through everything to do with these principles. I mean, Sid talked about the feeling all the time, and of course we get many questions like, what is this feeling, or how do I get the feeling, or you know, and it's the way I think of it is that feeling is the feeling we have when we're home, when we're within ourselves, when our mind is finally quiet, you know, and we have that opportunity just to suspend all of our thinking about the past and our lives and our issues, and we just get quiet. That feeling is automatic. It's automatic. So people, when they first experience the principles, often talk about a feeling that they can't quite get their finger on why it occurred or when it's going to come back, and so on and so forth. And it's the way I look at it is, I remember Sid saying once that what we're looking for is a state of no thought. And a little while later, either in that same talk that he gave or another one, he talked about how you can't be alive without thought. So I'm like, oh, okay, there's a contradiction there. What do you mean? We're looking for a state of no thought, but you can't be alive without thought. And I remember asking him about it. And what he said was, when he talks about no thought, when he mentions no thought and quiet mind, he's talking about no thought from the past. No thought from anything we've been considering, worrying about, stressing over, just no thought from the past. And when I asked him about that, he said, yeah, no thought from the past, but what you're looking for in a quiet mind is a deeper dimension of thought. And I remember just being enthralled with that idea. What do you mean by a deeper dimension of thought? He said, when your mind is quiet from thoughts from the past, right, then what you're left with is pure thought, just the essence of thought. And he said something that confused me for a while. He said, thought is the pathway into the world and our past and all that, but it's also this beautiful magical pathway into that world of the true self. So when we think about the feeling, I'll just put it this way. Every negative, insecure, worried, angry, concerned thought we have, every thought we have actually, has a feeling attached to it, you know, positive, neutral, or negative. And so the one thing I've come to see in this life is that negative thought of any kind has to be, negative feelings of any kind have to be supported by thought. Right? On the other hand, that beautiful feeling of who and what we are on the inside requires no thought, because it's the natural state. It is the natural state. So when all of us describe that first feeling we get, when we just get a nice feeling when we're learning about the principles or listening to one of Sid's talks or whatever, that's really what we're talking about, a moment when we let go of all of that thinking and we're just at home in our true self. And that beautiful feeling is automatic. It's absolutely automatic, because that is the natural state.
One of the most beautiful memories I have of Sid sharing directly from a spiritual place with me was because usually when we were with him, we were just being ordinary and visiting with him, but every once in a while he would talk about the spiritual. And I remember one day I called him because I was feeling super grateful for my life in that moment. We'd probably known him for maybe 25 years or something, but the learning kept getting deeper and deeper, you know, the longer we knew him. But I remember I was just feeling so grateful for everything in my life at that particular moment. And I just had this feeling I have to call Sid and tell him. And he was the most amazing person at picking up on feelings. So he could tell whether we were feeling, our minds were quiet and we were in the feeling. And that could be a source of, kind of discomfort sometimes because it's not like he could read our thoughts, but it was really obvious to him when we were in the feeling and when we weren't. And so that day when I called, I just remember right away, I just said, Sid, I'm just so grateful for my life right now. I just feel it's everything I have. And it was just the simple things in life I was thinking of. It was just grateful for my family and being alive. And he said, well, ask me any question you want. And he usually didn't say that. He usually would just say, well, you don't have to keep asking, you know the answer, kind of thing. And but so he said, ask me any question you want. And so I asked him a question about thought. And he said, oh dearie, don't worry about thought. You're automatically thinking, everybody's thinking. He said, but what you need to remember is that consciousness is a beautiful gift. And whenever consciousness brings you a beautiful feeling, be grateful for that feeling. And don't try and hang on to it or worry about whether you'll find it again. And if you do lose the feeling and you think you've lost the feeling, he said, don't worry, it's always there. But don't try and make yourself have that feeling, and don't worry about whether you have it. Just when you have it, be grateful for it. And that was all he said. And it was so profound for me that I still remember the exact place I was sitting that day when I was talking to him on the phone. It struck me so deeply. And what I heard for myself was, when you're grateful, that's it. That's your way of experiencing your true self. It's your true self coming through, as Chip said. And it also occurred to me that when I'm grateful for a beautiful feeling, that's self-perpetuating. And so that really helped me that day. And I'll never forget it, because I know a lot of times we talk to so many people now, and we always have, that ask us always about, what happens when I lose the feeling, or people feel down on themselves because they're not in the feeling. And whatever Sid said that day about consciousness, to me, cut through all that. And again, I don't have that beautiful feeling all the time. And sometimes I think, compared to that first awakening that I had in 1975, where I heard something so deep about there's this true self, that's who I really am. And that was such a dramatic contrast to all my misery before that moment, that of course the feeling seemed extra special. But now it's my experience most of the time is to have that beautiful feeling. And it's not in contrast to all that misery. So sometimes it seems ordinary. The feeling now seems more ordinary. But I know that whether I'm in it and I'm feeling peaceful or loving towards people, or whether I'm feeling judgmental, which happens a lot. Like everybody else, I get negative thinking comes in. I find it easier to just be myself and not worry where those thoughts are going. Just see it as just life going by, life happening. But I don't have to feel bad or worried about anything. I just go through those, sometimes not feeling positive or secure or loving, but it's okay. And the more I accept that, the more loving feelings and secure feelings, non-judgmental feelings are taking over more and more of my life. So it does change the environment, and it's not like it's perfect, but it gets nicer and nicer.
Yeah, over time we begin to see the innocence of the fact that we think that we are truly psychologically innocent, you know. And of course, the hardest person usually to see that in is yourself. You know? But at some point in the learning with this, I think there's a level of acceptance that's necessary of our humanity, that we are human. We go in and out. You know? And that acceptance is really beautiful, because it doesn't mean that you're not open to when those beautiful moments come along. It doesn't mean that you're not going to grow. It's just that you're not jumping back on the train again, you know, when those thoughts come. So I remember Sid saying something really beautiful about it. He said that it's not about being in a perfectly high state of mind all the time. It's about going in and out of separate realities with grace. And that grace is that seeing of the innocence of it, you know, that we're just, everybody's just like everybody else. The game of life is the same for absolutely everybody, regardless of their level of consciousness. It's just different from one level to the next. And the most beautiful difference that comes as we go along is when we start to go in and out of levels of consciousness, in and out of different levels of understanding with grace. And we start to have a little bit of a sense of humor about ourselves. We see how we run around in this world reacting and doing this and doing that. And it's really beautiful then, because you just look and you learn. You don't go beyond observation. You see it for what it is, you let it come and you let it go. But the real beauty is you get to that point where even when you go into something, you know you're home. You know that you're just looking at something and you're home. Even when you're down, I guess I'd say it this way. There was a time when my thoughts were so real to me, and life was so scary to me because I took it as real, that it just seemed like hopeless, you know. Now today, it's a strange thing that I could still have some of those same thoughts, you know? But part of me really, really knows what they are, and it just takes the energy out of it. It's just like, okay, you just watch it pass. And that quiet watching of it pass is part of growing. You know, it's not what we're seeing that counts. It's where we're looking at it from that counts. And as we get quiet, we're looking at it from a higher, more peaceful, quiet place, what Sid would refer to as the true self. You know, even when we're caught up, there's part of us that's looking at it from that place. And that's how we learn. You know, we learn by just seeing it for what it is, and knowing that. Another analogy I like is you just get on this train of growth that you're heading towards your home. You're always moving towards your true self. But once in a while, when you're on your train, you start thinking other thoughts again. And you have some feelings about being down, but you're still on the train.
Something just occurred to me that Kelly had said that some people that are here today didn't know our story, and I'm not going to tell our whole story, but but what occurred to me when Chip said that, when you just said that, it's where you're looking at it from. Well, when I first met Sid Banks in 1975, I came, with some friends to his house, and I was just along for the ride with these friends of ours, so who knew him. And so that day when Sid was talking in his living room, I heard him say something that changed my life forever, because he was talking about how all of us have this beautiful self, true self. And he said something like, if everybody could see how beautiful they are inside and who they really are, they'd have all the happiness they could ever want. And that was that split second where the old me of all the fear and insecurity and unhappiness just for a split second wasn't there. And I just felt there's this true self. I felt within that beautiful feeling, that person before all the conditioning, or that being before all the conditioning of my life. And I felt extreme peace. And I couldn't see any of my problems. I just saw my life as a beautiful pathway in front of me with no details, but I knew it was going to be beautiful. And that was my experience. And then what occurred to me is, the wise people have always said you have to find it in yourself. You have to find truth in yourself. And it occurred to me that this man was talking, but the wisdom, how could the wisdom be coming from him if I was hearing it? It must have been in me all along. And that it would be then I would have that wisdom forever. So that's the feeling state and the insight state I went to. And then when I went home that day, I went back to the same house, the same husband, the same little child, and the same reality. But it did not look the same to me. It looked, all the things that had looked wrong before, and all my unhappiness, it wasn't there. I was seeing a new world. I was living in a new world. And as I said, it hasn't been perfect forever, that I don't go in and out of, the nice feeling and the not so nice feeling. But that day when I went back, it was the same world, but it was, like you said, it was where I was seeing it from that had changed. But that changed everything in the outside world, to the point where our life on the outside doesn't resemble anything that it did back then. It's like all things, events that have happened, people that have come into our lives, just so much more positivity and beauty has come in. And so it's a different world, and that world has come from within and then manifest on the outside.
I love that, talking about how you saw a whole new world. I remember Sid used to talk about when your level shifts, it's a complete kit. You see everything different, everything is different. And it's true, because once again, it's not all the details that we're looking at, where we're looking at it from. Yeah, that's really neat. It's really neat. That's how it takes care of everything.
But then what we were looking at changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we had been trying to change.
Oh yeah.
We had been searching and trying to find answers in life. That's the irony of it. And when we gave up is when life brought us the answers.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing for sure is you listen in such a way that eventually you give up the search. Because there's no finding when you're searching. It's one or the other. You're either searching or you're finding. I love what Jan was saying, because it's a description of something that Sid talked about through almost all of his talks, when he would talk about seeing and hearing. That's what seeing is, a split second in time when your conditioned view of the world drops away, when your thinking drops away, and you see what is instead of what isn't. That's what Jan described, and I love the way she described it. You see what is instead of what isn't. What isn't is the world we've made up, the world that we've created.
And you can't convince anybody, or try and see part of the search was we would try and convince other people to look at this, that there's something deeper in life.
Yeah, right.
But what happened when I got that beautiful feeling and I went home that day, then you saw me being happy, but you couldn't get there. No. At first. No. You couldn't figure out, how was I feeling so good? We had all the same circumstances.
Yeah, like not only could I not figure it out, at first I didn't believe it was real. I thought Jan was putting it on, or that she was just caught up in something, right? So the idea that the thing that Jan brought home, like, we were definitely in trouble when this happened as a couple, right? And my wife goes away for the day and comes home and basically is telling me we have no problems. It's just our thinking. I'm like, yeah, right. And because we've been searching and working so hard to find something, Zen and meditating and books on psychology, oh my God, just everything. It struck me as so absolutely absurd that Jan could listen to this Scottish welder for an hour and come home and be a different person. So I really did not believe it. And I did my best to get her back where I knew her. I would try and start, this is hindsight. I would try and start arguments. I'd try to get her upset, and I could catch her a little bit, But I'd see that moment when she'd settle back into herself. And so you could say that what happened to me when Jan came home was total confusion, right? I was very confused by what I saw. But the gift that I was given at that time is the fact that Jan's newfound happiness and state of mind was sustained in spite of what I thought the circumstances were, in spite of me being not the nicest person to be around in those days. That shift in her was sustained. And that's what turned my confusion to curiosity. Okay? That's what made me want to look, not the words. Okay? It was the feeling that she was living in. It was obvious to me, as much as I tried to deny it to begin with, that Jan was living in a better feeling. Lately, when I talk about that, I talk about this life. The feeling you're in is all you get. That's it, right now. And back then, that would have been a terrible thing to accept. But once that curiosity was there, just think about this. You're in denial, you don't like what you see, even though it's beautiful. But slowly you begin to get curiosity because it's so sustained that it's not going away. The second you get curiosity, what comes into your thinking is hope. Just to have curiosity, to look at a new direction is hope. If you didn't have hope, you wouldn't be doing that. And hope really does change the direction of your thinking. The contours of your thinking, if you will. It changes it. It absolutely changes it. And if you look at the whole history of Sid Banks and the three principles, that dynamic is there in every story. Like even Sid's original story, when he had his experience, I can tell you for sure, because I knew these people, his family was totally confused. They thought he'd lost his mind. They were frightened. They were absolutely frightened. But the feeling he lived in after that and the way he was with people, they too saw that it was sustained, that it was something real. And they became curious, particularly Barbara, his wife. And she began to see and learn and grow at an amazing rate. I can think of every client we ever had, every program we've ever done, that element is there. When we worked with women in a women's prison in Florida, we didn't have a clue of how we were going to address it. We'd never been in an environment like that. All we could do was tell our story and play some recordings of Sid and share his books. But a couple of weeks into it, one of the inmates, and I'm just paraphrasing here, I don't remember the exact terms, but she comes into the class and everybody's kind of settling in. And we're asking how people are doing, how's it going? What do you think? And she puts up her hand and she said, the other night, I woke up and I sat bolt upright on my bunk. And she said, I knew I created this life that I'm in, and I knew I could create any life I want. And that room just went dead silent. And people were really looking. But what really happened was her and another person and a couple more, but particularly that one person, changed so much in that. And believe me, this was a terrible environment. Can't imagine a worse environment, really. But nobody had ever seen that kind of change, particularly in that environment. It had never been seen before. I can guarantee you that. And at first, there were the same doubts, like, oh yeah, they've just been to this class and it'll go away. But eventually people around that person, a couple of them actually, around those couple of people began to see the reality of that change, the reality of their happiness, the reality of their growth, the change in their behavior. And eventually that created a lot of confusion, particularly among the corrections officers and the officials, but also among their friends. And that confusion eventually turned into curiosity. So when that turned to curiosity for another 20 or 30 inmates, the direction of their thinking changed. And they began to seek that feeling that was inside. And as they did, they began to change. And it was ripples. You could see it going out into their families. We've heard stories of people talking on the phone with their mothers and sons and daughters, and you could see that ripple going out. You could see that change occurring. It was the same in business. You know, we always saw that one or two people that had an insight at a really deep level, and even in terms of performance, but how they were in the business would change so dramatically that it would have at first caused that confusion, but then bring that curiosity and then bring learning to everybody. So it's really been that pattern. I love to see the fact that that pattern keeps repeating. And it doesn't take much. See, that's the thing. Everybody, well, let me not say everybody, but a lot of us seem to think we need to be able to talk a lot about the three principles, describe them, and so on. And when the time is right, it's a beautiful thing to do. But actually, your own personal story of change is what affects people. Mm-hmm. For one thing, and I'll just say this, I think the only authority anybody has to talk about these principles is their own experience. Mm-hmm. Because when you talk from your own experience, it brings a level of authenticity that people feel. And that authenticity that they feel is what gives them that hope. They see that something's happened. Right? They see that something's possible. Right? And immediately changes their mindset. That they see that something is possible. And then they start listening with real curiosity. So that pattern keeps repeating. And to this day, it still repeats. Even with individual clients, we start talking with somebody we just met about them and their world and what's going on. And then we finally get to a place where there's that feeling. And the next thing we start hearing is how people around them have been affected. I love that. I really love that.
When you said that about people sharing their story, it occurred to me earlier on that when I first heard Sid talk, that I heard something that about true self. And then the next time I heard Sid talk, I heard him share his story. And I don't think that first day, I don't think he was telling, because the people in the room visiting him that day were people that knew him and heard his story already. But then the next time I think I heard Sid talk, he was talking more in a public gathering. And he shared his story about when he had his experience of one day just really realizing that true self. And every time he did another event, he would always share that story. And I remember that I loved the whole talk, but when he started sharing that story, what occurred to him that day, and another experience he'd had just prior to that, the big experience he had about realizing that insecurity is created by our thought. And those were the times in his talks where I'd be just sitting up and then I'd be just feeling this so much feeling of like hope and relief and joy all wrapped into one. And so when I look back, he basically every time he would share, even if it was a short version of that story, and all his writings and his videos, it often comes up that he'll say what happened to him. One particular video, especially the experience, I think it's called. So, and he would tell us that he would remind us of our story. Like he would, if we did a retreat with Sid, he would say, Jan, remember what happened to you that day when you came to my house the first time you met me? And then he put me on a spot, so I'd end up sharing to these, a team of executives or whatever. And it showed me. And then when we went into prison, we did the same thing. We shared our story with those women. And what it did was it gave them hope, because I remember saying, I've never been in prison, so I can't relate to what you're saying about how horrible it is here. The first night we taught to this group of women, but I know what it's like to feel hopeless, like so hopeless that you just feel miserable every day and you can't see the light, and you just kind of don't, you just don't know what to do because you're so unhappy. And I said, so I know what that feels like. And I'm telling you that I heard something about this part of me, this true self, and that you have it too. That's what we would share with these women. And so we would go away and not come back till the following week. And in between that time, we just would go in and do like a tune-up, because the women were sharing with each other.
Yeah.
And they were finding hope in the worst of circumstances. And so to me, that is so beautiful. And they would share, they were living each other's stories. They were watching each other go, change in the worst environment. So they were watching each other's story unfold right in real time. And so really that the whole idea of, if you have something that you remember about when you first heard that there's hope, and that something that brought you out of your that pessimistic or negative view of life, and brought you that feeling, that's a good thing to remember. And I'm sure already a lot of you have shared with other people that have come to you and say, well, what's happened? How come you're so happy? Or what's happened to you? And then you just are sharing something really simple with them. And that's what people hear. They hear the simplicity. And that they hear that, yeah, we are all the same. We really are. That's the beautiful part of this, is that to show humanity that we really are all the same inside.
I mean, Sid's gift when he talked to people was simply that he didn't talk to the presentation. He didn't talk to the mask. He talked to the soul behind the mask. That was his gift. And that's the gift we all have if we want it. It's just, there's something really amazing about that. When we first worked in the prison system, we were leaving one night. It may have been a month after we started or whatever. And another corrections officer stopped us on the way and said, listen, what are you doing to those people? Doing to them? What do you mean? And he said, every other class we have here, almost every time somebody has to be dragged out, or the teacher will need help because people are arguing and fighting amongst themselves. But it's always quiet in there. What are you doing to those people? And I honestly didn't quite know how to answer it, and I didn't answer it at that time. But on the way home, driving along in the dark, it just occurred to me that the first day I went there, I had ideas about who we were going to talk to. These were inmates. These are people who committed crimes, right? And I had that in my head, and I knew that wasn't a good thing to have, but it was there. Until we sat down in front of them and we looked at them, and we just saw there was this room full of souls, and the past was irrelevant. And that's the gift that Sid had given us, was the ability to see people, to see something beyond the presentation, beyond what they looked like in that moment, how they spoke in that moment. And they somehow felt that. And that explained the question that the corrections officer was asking us, is because we saw them as whole, because we saw them as healthy, they whether they heard that intellectually or not, they felt that. And I doubt that any of them had ever, or for a long time, had never experienced anybody looking at them as whole and worthy and beautiful, you know. And they took that, I think, as the ultimate form of respect for who and what they really are, right? And that's why that was like that. That's why in 3 years, 2 hours a night, 2 nights a week, not a rude word, not a single rude word, you know.
Wow, I just saw how I could extrapolate that even though I see on the news or whatever, I see a lot of negativity out there. There is but each person I come in contact with in real time every day, and all of us, if we're practicing that, like if we're, you know, doing our best at least to really see the innocence in everybody we personally come in contact with, that is the answer to. And Sid used to tell us that. He told us before he passed, when he saw the work we were doing in the prisons, and we exclusively used Sid's materials in the prisons. And he said, can you imagine with the changes, because eventually all the women in the whole prison changed so much that we got invited to train the staff, and then it led to work in other connected institutions in that area, work release programs, etc. And Sid said, if that can change a whole prison, if my, you know, looking at my materials, his materials, and he knew that we were sharing our story as well. He said, can you imagine if those books were the best sellers on every book stand in the world, that the world would change overnight. And I remember it just stopped us in our tracks, because we've been feeling so proud of ourselves, you know, that we'd gone in and done this work, and we were moved by the women's change, but there was a bit of that thing that we helped this happen. But we know it was them directly reading, like the Enlightened Gardener, especially, and going deeper themselves. But that really stopped us in our tracks that day. And then from then on till the rest of Sid's life, we did our best to help his books and materials be recognized, because it's a direct, without any interpretations, it's giving people a chance to have that, the purest of ways to find their true selves. Because when I listen to Sid, I don't hear Sid, I hear my true self. That's the way I hear what he had to say.
We're definitely all looking for quiet. We're looking for a quiet mind. And that ability to see the innocence of everybody's thinking. Put it another simple way, to suspend your own amount of judging of yourself and others. Can you see how directly that has a relationship to finding a quiet mind? How many volumes and volumes and volumes of thinking that I carry, mostly about myself, but also about how I was raised, all of that stuff, you know. That to get a fresh look at everything, you really do have to find a quiet mind.
And you know, it occurred to me is that we've always we get better and better at it, but we do have, just like everybody else, we'll discuss like other people's behavior, other people that we know, right?
Yeah.
And less and less do we do that. Like we're it's like, I love the idea that you can just keep going deeper and deeper. There's no end to how much you learn. But it just occurred to me that that's really helped us. Like the more our minds get quieter, and we basically listen to a little bit of something to start our day, something from Sid, but that we less and less talk about other people's behavior, because it keeps like, it's like, duh, you know, you can't change anyone's behavior. Like we keep learning that with each other.
Yeah.
And so when you see that, you realize that you don't even have to think about other people's behavior, because if you can't change other people's behavior, then why even lend any mental activity? It's just taking away from your time you have in life to enjoy life. You know, it's like, so then when the more you give up on even thinking about other people's behavior, that's the freedom. And what the beautiful result is that other people's behavior becomes more, you know, amenable, or just, you know, kinder or whatever, the more you just leave them be and see their innocence.
And even if it doesn't with some people,
Exactly.
it's still
Yeah,
the feeling you're living in that
exactly.
counts, you know.
But it does affect other people around
It does
you.
affect other people, absolutely. Like the inmates as an example,
Yeah.
you know, and people closer to us. That's suspension of judgment. Right? You know, I remember Sid saying, you can teach people a lot about what they do with thought, how thought affects their life, but if you really want to help them, show them a whole new world. Right? They'll see for themselves what thought is. And it's like, I remember Jan said something once that really got my attention about thinking about negative things and things we get caught up in. She referred to it as a waste of the precious gift of thought. And said that. And that really touched me, because that's exactly what it is. It's just a waste of the precious gift called thought. You know, this incredible power we have, that we're born with, this gift of thought. And that it is a waste. I mean, it's innocent, but it's a waste. Wasting judgment and thinking about things.
What happened with me is that I woke up one night and I couldn't fall back to sleep, because sometimes when I wake up, I'm sure people can relate to this. I would start thinking about little details about, you know, life, and oh, I need to take care of this, and drive myself crazy with that. And that one night, I remember that just came from the back of my mind of what I was doing. And yeah, that's when it happened. It was when I was feeling a lot of stress, and I couldn't stop the thoughts. And I mean, that doesn't always occur to me, but it was a beautiful insight to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's millions more. There's infinite amount of insights in there for all of us. That's the beauty of it. They'll never stop coming in.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wow. What do you think? Should we
See if people have some comments or questions or insights?
Thank you so much, the two of you. It was just a lovely unfoldment. And yes, let's open up the room to anybody. If you just want to raise your hand, Kari will be there to see you in that. I see Karen already. Let me just get to gallery view here. You guys are faster than me. And so Karen Angelucci, please. Yes, let's have some conversation.
Thank you, Kelly and Jan and Chip. My heart is very happy hearing you voice your experience and your the work that you're doing and sharing with us. So thank you. I was wondering if you could speak to the feeling of self-compassion. You spoke of, I'll just refer to the inmates and the brave woman that spoke up right away to say that she realized her story was one that she created and that now she could change that. And I'm wondering, maybe not for her, but for many people that have the storyline of maybe they've had a lot of ill will or whatever it is they've experienced in a negative form in their life, that there's a level of, I think, self-compassion and recognizing that this is the story you created, but there's hope for me to create something new. And how, yes, if you could speak to self-compassion, I think that is for me is a very big component of moving into changing the story. And if that makes sense.
That's beautiful. But your question just shows how wise you are. You know, that question occurs to you as something that's meaningful for people. And your true self, our true self, which is all the same self, we're not separate in the true self, is infinite compassion. That's all it is. There's no judgment. The true self, there's no judgment in the true self. And just to, I think just to know, if you've had an experience where you've had even the taste of that beautiful feeling, then you know you've made a connection to that true self, which is infinite love. And so for me, just to know that if I have something, a little bad feeling about myself, or a regret, or a bit of guilt, or whatever, it's getting easier for me to just see, there I go again. You know, I'm always so ready to doubt myself, and just let it go. Don't hang on to it and feed it and start analyzing myself. Just see, oh, I've done it again. I've just forgotten that my true self is none of the negativity. That's my personal self trying to distract from the fact that I'm absolutely infinite beauty and joy, which was my first insight. So it's getting easier for me to not believe when I get that self-doubt. And again, like Chip, for myself, I'll speak for myself. I was waking up in the mornings, like maybe 6 years ago, feeling anxious about what it was I had to do that day or whatever. So my mind would start getting busy. And one morning I woke up and I thought, wow, when I first heard something years ago that changed my life, I was still listening to what Sid had to say about true self. And now 6 years ago, I woke up and I realized, what am I doing every day? I'm heading right down to the office because, you know, we're 8 hours behind Europe, and that's where most of our clients were. And I thought, wow, I'm starting my day just jumping into the personal reality. And I'm going to go back to just starting my day, getting to know my true self, you know, I just woke up from the quiet of sleep. Now I want to start my day transitioning from that to the real world. And so that day I made up my mind, I'm going to start my day differently and listen to my true self. And my mind got quieter after that, and my work got easier. I was more relaxed around, you know, my family, and beautiful feelings started to come in. So I think I realized my mind wasn't really quiet, and Chip had talked about that earlier.
It's a beautiful question, because that's what we all struggle with. And the fact that we all struggle with it is part of the answer, is that we're all human, right? We all have a story in our heads about ourselves, right? And the true self has nothing to do with that, you know? And you have that true self. So it pays to be kind to yourself, you know? It pays to just let yourself off the hook. Now, I'll tell you, when I first met Sid, I lived in such a world of guilt, anger, shame. I mean, that was my world, right? Especially the guilt. I was really good at guilt, right? And I spent 2 days with Sid once, working on some stuff on his house, just hanging out. And I won't go into the details of it, but I thought I was there to test him, to find out if he knew anything, because I had my whole head full of Zen Buddhism and psychology and everything. I want to know if this guy knew anything. I popped some questions about consciousness through the day, and the first one I asked him, this big, deep consciousness question, and he looked at his cup of tea that he had, and he said, "You know, Chip, this is the best cup of tea I've ever had." So I repeated the question. He said, "No, really, this is the best cup of tea I've ever had." So I took it to mean that he didn't know the answer to my deep question, and I didn't want to embarrass him, so we carried on with our day. And then we were having a bit of dinner, and I thought, well, I'll ask him this one more deep, I don't remember what the questions were. Question about consciousness raising of some kind. And he said, he looked out at the ocean. He said, do you believe the color of that water? I said, yeah, but Sid, and I asked the question, right? He said, I've never seen the ocean like that, ever. It's so beautiful. And I realized he didn't know the answer to my question. So I thought, he's a nice guy. We'll finish our work together and we'll call it quits, right? So we'd finished fixing up this fireplace in his house, putting a new stone face on it. And he was so excited about this fireplace. He kept going on about he kept saying, it looks like it's 200 or 300 years old. It's so beautiful. And he was like jumping up and down like a kid that just opened his Christmas presents, right? And I'm like, you know, it's a nice fireplace. It's not the Sistine Chapel, you know. I was honestly tickled, humored by his excitement. And he said, well, I got to put a wee fire in this fireplace. And I said, see, we can't do that. You know, the mortar's green, it may crack if you put a fire in. He said, no, I just have to see flames. And he said, I just have to put a wee fire in it. Okay. So I walked over to the picture window that looked out on the sea. And there was a ship going by in the distance with that kind of orange, I forget what they call it, but kind of phosphorescent kind of light. And there was something about that just grabbed my attention, right? And I was looking at this ship going by, and it grabbed my attention so much I wanted to see it clearly, so I pulled the curtain from the window around my head so I could look out, and I'm looking out there. And in the background, I can hear the kindling snapping, and I started to laugh, you know. He's going to put a fire in this fireplace no matter what. And I just turned my attention back to the ship that's going by. And then I heard the flames starting and crackling, and I chuckled again. I'm looking at this ship, and from behind me, I heard, so I turned around to look at him, and he was sitting beside the fireplace. Both he and the fireplace looked up at the window I was standing at. But he was sitting on his haunches next to the fireplace, and he looked up at me. And he said, Chip, isn't it nice to know that you've never done anything wrong in your entire life? And I'm like, you have no idea. The list is horrendous, you know? And I didn't say that. That's what I was thinking. But it was a weird thing. It was like being in two worlds at once, because my head was going, no, you don't know. But the feeling was that it was true. And I couldn't understand that intellectually. And I actually started to shake, you know, and I started to tear up, and I had no frame of reference for what was happening. And then Sid jumped up and slapped off his pants and said, you know, see ya, good night, and walked out, you know. And I was like, oh my God. And I had to find a chair. I had to find a place to sit down. So I'm sitting in this living room on this chair in the dark, looking at this fire. There was just one lamp on. And there was just this beautiful feeling, you know, and I had no understanding for what that was. So I was staying there. I stayed in his son's room. I went and I laid down, and Salt Spring at night in those days was so dark. I mean, without a light on, you really couldn't see anything. So I was laying in that darkness, and I felt the most peace I'd ever felt in my entire life. You know? And I had no intellectual understanding of what had happened. In fact, it was a long time before I had any understanding of what had happened. But eventually I saw that that was the first time that anybody had ever spoken directly to my true self. Okay. Chip, isn't it nice to know that you've never done anything wrong in your entire life? When I woke up the next morning, I just had this light feeling I'd never experienced before. I still didn't know what it was or why it was. That came later. But it's true for all of us. You know? Whatever we've done with this, and the experiences we've had, and the way we formed our defenses in this life from our experiences or whatever, that's not us. Okay? And the true self is spiritual in nature. It's not of this world. Okay? So it can't do anything wrong. It can't be hurt. It's never been hurt. Okay? And Karen, that's why I loved your question when I heard it. It really
Thank you for asking.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Would anybody else like to?
I see Joe has his hand up. Joe, do you want to unmute yourself?
Please.
Hiya.
Hi, Joe.
Hi,
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about, because I would hear Sid say about like if you've got like an insecure thought or thought, he'd say change thought, or he talked about the brain being a computer, like the metaphor, and he would say about changing the discs. But then also heard him say that you can't intellectually change thought because it's like changing one belief or another. So was he more kind of talking about changing from the intellectual to like the wisdom or the kind of true self, like you say? So he wasn't actually saying about change for saying I'm an insecure person to I'm a secure person. He was saying kind of stop listening to your intellectual and listen to your wisdom.
I think you've got it, Joe. That's exactly it. It's like, you can't like, oh, I'm going to think positive from now on. I mean, that's been tried for a long time. The change in the disc happens when we get quiet enough through listening. The disc is automatically changed. Right? It's in the quiet. It's a moment when we literally stop the world that we project from our thinking, the world we think exists. It's a split second when we stop that. And we see, because we're looking at it again from somewhere new, the disc is automatically changing. You see a new world, and that's how you learn, because you see that new world juxtaposed over the world you've been in. And that's a beautiful gift. I don't know if that is a really good answer, but I love the question. It really is the moment when we get quiet, right?
And you know, it's interesting. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What just struck me, the irony of when we were on that spiritual search, which we first, 7 years of our marriage, after we first met, we were dedicated to this search, that we were living in the duality, because if you're searching for your true self, you're automatically saying you're not already that true self. Like we didn't, and we were reading about true self and Buddhism, but it was all just, you know, we were missing the point. And then when we met Sid, it's like the two worlds came together and we realized all there really is our true self. So that's why he talked about the illusion and that illusionary personal self. And now I'm comfortable with that. Like I back then I was like, I want to shed the bonds of this earthly self and, you know, reach nirvana and everything. But now I'm comfortable with just being a human being and knowing that it looks like there's a duality, but there really isn't. There's only our true self. And I can't, Sid would say, never ask me why we do that, why we have this personal self. That you just see that's where it is. And it's okay. It's beautiful to have a human self, because otherwise we wouldn't experience consciousness and have this existence, which has so much beauty in it. So I love that question, and I love the way you answered it.
You too. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Who else?
Natasha, do you want to unmute?
Hi.
Oh, hi,
Hey.
Natasha.
Hi. I wouldn't normally talk in front of so many people, so I'm just imagining it's just you guys and me in a room.
That's all there is.
That's all I can see. But I wanted to say thank you, and sorry, it's quite emotional just listening to you, to get so quiet, and the love. I feel really grateful for you showing up and sharing from that place that just touches something. And I would say in the last few months, I have seen something so glorious and vast and internal that I have never touched before. And I can't even put words to the gloriousness of it, the space that's never ending inside, and at the same time this quite unsettling that I've seen something so beautiful, and which kind of seems ironic that I've seen something so huge and immense, I have no other words, yet at the same time going, cool, I'm quite freaked out by that. And I didn't know whether you could speak to that at all. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
That was beautiful.
Just enjoy the beautiful feeling that you got. That's what Sid would tell us. If we had that all of a sudden become overwhelmed with a beautiful feeling, and then we'd want to try and figure it out. And he'd say, don't figure it out. Just enjoy it and just enjoy that beautiful feeling. And the fact that you shared that with all of us, I see that as a gift, because you're talking from a place of that deep feeling, not an intellectual place at all. You were just, so yeah, that my suggestion is don't try and figure it out. Just, and don't try, like for me, if I try and hang on to it, I just let it go and then watch my life different, watch my life appear as different after I've had a deep insight like that. Like it shows up in my life. So it's not like you have to, as I said, hang on to it or figure it out. It's already connecting you to a deeper place in yourself that is going to show up in your life without you having to do anything. If you try and do something, it goes the opposite way, but just, you don't have to do anything, basically.
Yeah, just be willing to get on the magic carpet and fly, basically. You know, it's really true. Like every deep insight you have, you think of it as being in that moment, and maybe shows you something in this moment about life, but actually the deepest insights we have teach us throughout our whole life. And you keep seeing it over and over again in a deeper and deeper level. So that's really amazing. That's really, really beautiful.
And like Sid told me that day, just be grateful for what just happened. Just be grateful. And then that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Tasha. That was great.
I'm so glad you just pushed the button, because it's so beautiful when you just sometimes think, oh, I don't feel like that. Maybe I shouldn't share. But when you do, it meant I know everybody got something from it.
There's a calling, I have to say, Natasha, and myself, when it's time to share. And so we appreciate that you show up in that way, for sure. It helps us all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do I see a hand? Would someone else like to share? Such a rich conversation of insights. Yes, Amy, please.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, I just want to say I'm also over here just crying. I really have enjoyed that, and that's all I really can say right now, because I'm kind of a mess. I keep having to turn off my video to blow my nose. So yeah.
Lovely.
I love how Jan, seeing it for herself, it moved you to see it for yourself, Chip. So I see that a lot in my life, and it makes me happy that I'm having that effect on my family and I can see it. So
beautiful.
My son yesterday said to me, I don't really have bad dreams anymore, Mom. They're my thoughts and they are what I make of them. And he's 8 years old. And so that made me know I'm doing something right. So anyways, I just wanted to say thank you.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, Amy. That was lovely, especially about your son.
Thank you for sharing. Absolutely. The ripple, we never know who it's going to affect or where it's going to land. Who else?
Carrie?
Oh, you saw me wiping a tear away. I wasn't really going to share, but really, this has been beautiful. And I'm crying because Amy and I, that's how she's come into it. And so just to see that this is a ripple, right? Like me seeing something and then being willing to share how it is the ripple, because it's not about me, it's just the sharing. Someone else sees something for themselves, you share today, others will see something for themselves, I'm seeing something, it's just like this is the wave. It's beautiful. So thank you.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Mhm.
It's the living of it that shares it.
Yeah.
You know, it's the living of it. That's really beautiful. You know, one of my favorite things about the whole thing, the principles going out to the world, is like, I really am grateful for people that are sharing it with the world. I'm grateful for the internet, getting it to all these different countries, but there's something happening at an even deeper level. And what that is like just listening to Amy, for instance, and Carrie, well, all of us so far. Natasha. I can look back in my family and see generation after generation of dysfunction, right? Sickness and addiction and anger and guilt. I can literally look back at least 3 generations, maybe 4, and see that. But what's amazing is it stops with us. You know, that my kids and my grandkids will never experience that level of despair, ever. And everybody on this call and everybody that we know that's finding a little bit for themselves, that goes forward through generations as well. You know, you can see that dysfunction goes forward through generations. That's obvious, you know, but so does health and understanding. And I love when I think about all the thousands of people around the world now that are finding this, that each one of their families is affected forever. You know, I just, there's something about that that really touches me, maybe just because of my personal experience. But, you know, when I see my grandkids now who are 8 and 10 and just how solid and happy they are and the home they live in, I think that's just amazing. It really is. It really is so simple, you know, to change the world at a core level in such a simple way.
I have a question for both of you. Often people say, as I'm sure it happened for yourselves, and I've heard many stories around this, yet I still have my own internal doubts around sharing the story, sharing my story, sharing a story, and just that place where, you know, feeling confident and being able to come out of ourselves and say, yes, there are people out there that want to hear the story, and finding my way into that. And I know that there's some in the room that have beautiful, beautiful stories, and they haven't shared yet. So how could you support them in conversation around that, and myself?
Let me tell you what Sid said to us about that very thing.
Okay.
Very simple. He said, stick your neck out. Honestly.
And only talk what you know.
And only talk what you know. Just stick your neck out and talk what you know. And I can guarantee you the first time we set out to share with a group or with anybody, that we had all the same thoughts. You know, and for me, it was like, am I really worthy? You know, I remember saying to Sid, he was asking me to talk at a particular event we were doing with him. And I remember saying, Sid, I still got all these insecurities and thoughts and everything. He just laughed. He said, I don't care about that. Just say what you know, say what you've seen, and stick your neck out. You know, like, you do your best. You do your best, and you'll learn one way or the other. You know, but the one thing to keep in mind is if you've had that feeling, and you've seen life from a different place, you have a story to share. And people think, well, I need to be able to talk about the principles in more detail and everything. That'll come. But if you share a simple story of a shift in how you see this life, people are not used to that. And Sid said to us many times, it doesn't take much. Yeah. So you just do your best. You stick your neck out. But the other thing too is just be patient. When the time is right, it'll be right. You know, you can't force anything like that. And when you're speaking to anybody one-on-one, you want to be sure that you have permission, you know, that you just feel whether there's an openness or not. And believe me, I made the mistake many times with family members in the beginning of feeling I had to tell them what this was and how their life could be different. You know, I have one brother that didn't speak to me for years and years because of that. So it's just like, take care of yourself first. You know, that's the main thing. Like, the moment will come when you just have the right feeling and be with somebody or with in a group, and you'll just stick your neck out. You know, and you'll do your best. And my bet is that 99.9% of the time it'll be absolutely beautiful. You know?
And really, it stems from living it. Like if you're living in that feeling, the automatic next thing is people will notice you're living in a nicer feeling, and people will start coming to you. You won't be even thinking about, how do I share this? People will notice, and then they'll be curious. And for me, that was the start. You know, when one of my relatives or neighbor would say, well, what's going on? And I would find myself just being ordinary and just sharing what I'd seen, and that just kind of organically turned into doing more of that. I never set out to be a teacher or anything, or somebody that shares this. It always came from the feeling first. And when in our work in corporate work that we did for many years, we would notice that when we were really in the feeling, clients would come out of nowhere. You know, the phone would ring or we get an email or whatever. And we started to catch on that just living it is number one, and the rest will follow, including the ability to lose that insecurity of sharing in front of others or talking. It's all part of that package, the level of consciousness.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I love what you said. My original construct of career was teaching. Falling away from the teacher in me and finding the feeling of insight and wisdom, you know, has been the journey. And so thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you. It was a great question. Definitely.
Yeah.
You don't know the form that sharing is going to take. You really don't know. And you may never talk about consciousness or principles or anything and share, you know, if you're in the feeling. Sid was encouraging us early on to start sharing what we knew, right? And I remember saying, well, where would I start? What I would say? And he'd just laugh and just say, well, just talk about what happened to you, you know? And we did a program in Vancouver in the early days, and we went with him. And after the first day, we went for a walk in this beautiful park in Vancouver called Stanley Park. There was like a half a dozen of us or so, and I was still talking to Sid about, you know, I wouldn't know where to start kind of thing. You know? So we were walking through the park, and I realized I had to find a restroom. And so I said, I'll catch up with you later. And I was pretty young then. I was like, what, 26 or 27, something like that. So this was all really new. So I found this restroom in Stanley Park. And this is a little graphic, but I'll tell you. I went in and I went to the urinal and do my thing. And there was an old man next to me, a very old man. He's probably my age now, that I am now. And anyway, we were standing there and I noticed that his shoulders were shaking. Oh, and I just turned to him and I said, are you okay? And he was just kind of gruff, yeah, I'm okay. And he stepped away and he was washing his hands. And I went up beside him at the sink to wash my hands, and he was convulsing in tears. I thought, oh my God, what is this? You know? And I said, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I said, well, let's sit on the bench outside till till things settle down. So he did that. He sat on the bench, and I sat with him, and we were just quiet for a long time. And he finally said something like, I'm sorry for my behavior or whatever, but I've just lost my wife. I forget what he said, like 50 years or something, right? I said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then he went on a tirade about how the doctors had not helped her, and the family had not been helpful. She should still be alive. He was just really, really angry. And I was like, oh, geez, you know, I don't know what to do here. And he finally got quiet and he was just sitting here. And it just came out of me. I said, so you and your wife had a good time in this life? Was it a good life? He said, oh, yeah. And he started telling me about their travels around the world. He was some kind of a professor or something, a teacher. Started telling me about how they'd been to Egypt and they'd been there. And he just started to light up, you know, talking about where they'd been and what they'd seen. You know? And I honestly, I didn't say another word. We just sat there, and then he stood up and embraced me, walked away. And I caught up with Sid and I was telling him about it. And he said, that's sharing. You know? So you don't know what form it's going to take. You know? You really don't. You just be present with people. You see their beauty and their innocence, and what comes out of you, you can't even predict. I haven't thought about that for a long time.
Amazing.
Each time I'm with you, I hear a new story, Chip. And each time I come to the conversation, I hear something new, even in the same story. And I think that's what the beautiful thing is about the conversation, is that I'm always hearing, I'm bringing a new person, and I'm always hearing something in a new way. So we have a few minutes left in this conversation. If anybody would like to ask Jen and Chip a question or unfold something they've seen, or possibly an insight, some wisdom, have a laugh or two, whatever you'd like to do. And we've got a few minutes left. And it's been a rich conversation of unfolding. Yes, please, Susie.
Susie Spence, hello.
Hello. Gorgeous to see you both. I'm sorry I came to the court a little late. I got the timing totally wrong. So, but it doesn't take long. It doesn't take long. And I just found that last story so moving. What I loved about it is that you just knew, or you were just guided just to give that man the respect, to just give him that space, you know, and there was no rush. There was such patience. And that really struck me. I really loved that. You know, you were obviously guided just to hold that deep silence for him, and yeah, and then point him in a more joyful direction. And he just, he found his own way, didn't he? He found his own way. And that's a really lovely reminder for me. I found that really, really powerful, actually.
Thanks, Susie.
Thank you. You're an amazing listener. I just really thought about that about you. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I loved how. I love how when you talk about living the principles, it's just that, isn't it? It's 24 hours a day, never knowing when an opportunity is going to turn up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it doesn't need to be in a session or with a client or anything.
Most of the time it's not.
Yeah. I've really been seeing that recently, and I love that. Yeah, and and just the best gift you can give to the world is just turning up as yourself.
Right on. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I'm really hearing recently. Yeah, and it's
Beautiful.
can be that simple, although it's not that simple. Can't be the hardest thing in the world to turn up as yourself, but it is that simple. It
Yeah,
actually
that's
is.
the beauty of it.
Yeah.
If it wasn't that simple, it wouldn't be real.
So yeah, so thank you. I always that's what I love, the both of you. You're always just so absolutely yourselves, and that's so beautiful.
Thanks. Susie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. It was lovely. Cheryl, did you want to please, Cheryl?
Hi there. I've so
Hi,
enjoyed.
Cheryl.
Hi.
Hello. My question is spirituality and religion, because of the work that I do and certainly my own personal experience of faith, that this is over and above. This is something even deeper than what we would call religion or even spirituality in a way. And I'm just curious how your experience of working with Sid addressed that question.
Mhm. Well, it is upstream from everything, upstream from absolutely everything. And one of my favorite recordings is the time that Sid addressed a church.
Oh, okay.
And talked about the spiritual essence of life. But I also heard him say many times we would be with people who are very religious, either Christians or
yes,
a rabbi or two here and there. He would always say, just stay with your religion, but look for the essence of it. Look for the feeling in it, look for the deeper understanding. And so we do the same thing. Like in the prison system, there was a lot of people who'd gone to Christianity in the church, in prison, because that was what was there, and they were looking for hope, they were looking for help. And we would never want to disturb that, because like Jan and I both remember the feeling of being in church when we were kids and loving the feeling, because it's a group of people looking for the essence of life, looking for the spiritual meaning of life. It's a beautiful thing. So for me, I don't really see a conflict. It's like I have some dear friends that are very religious, and somebody once challenged me, well, isn't that like having all of these belief systems and everything? And I just said, I look at them and I see that they're sharing an immense amount of love with the world. They're in service to humanity, and they're just beautiful people who are growing. So I don't really care.
and we all have beliefs, whether we know it or not. It may not be, we may not, relate it to religion, but it's like that thing about cast your own stone or whatever.
Yeah,
like
right.
If I say to someone, my beliefs are better than yours, it's like the world of belief is not our true self.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
it's an interesting subject. It really is. But, I just look at people for the feeling they have, and their willingness to share that feeling with us, with me. That's enough for me. I'm not smart enough to figure out all the ins and outs of religion.
So again, if we're living in a world of more of true self, and we're getting more acquainted with our true self, then it all becomes irrelevant, because we know that the worlds of belief comes after our true self. It's like, and so that's, to me, that makes it all much simpler, is again not trying to figure it out, realizing that there's a lot of things we share as human beings that are to do with our personal self, and some things we don't share, but underneath it, we're all that true self. And so that takes care of everything. If we just keep remembering that. I don't experience the whole the significance of that on a deep level, but I can feel it. I can feel that that's the truth, is that we are all one before all our beliefs.
And to be perfectly honest, I found myself speaking from the dogma of the three principles at times. and not from here. And I've seen people who have a lot of specific beliefs religiously speaking from a much deeper level. So it's not about what's on the outside. You know? I've been just as guilty of speaking from dogma as anybody. So we just keep learning to go inside. And if somebody, for instance, find themselves in prayer with a really quiet mind, same thing.
Thank you.
I thank you, Cheryl, for addressing that, because I think that there's always question around where, you know, at times we're looking to fit things in our world of understanding, to place it where we can feel a sense of comfort in it or something like that. And so, Jan, you said it so beautifully, that the world of belief is not our true self. That was just beautiful. And I think too, I remember in my early days when I went to church, I went for the feeling of all those people singing and having community, and I often went for the message, because you know it really didn't matter who was standing up saying it. I went for the message of
Right on.
Right on.
it was, and yeah, so similar to this room and to all that you have shared. It's we all have an understanding of what this message is for us, as Susie was sharing so eloquently there, seeing for herself and for the rest of you. I would like to offer maybe you could just share a little bit about the school before we close today, and tell them all about that amazing thing that you do, because it was so rich for me, and some here do not know about it, and maybe you could share with them what you do and how you do it over there in that beautiful island.
Well, it's true that it's a beautiful island, but I would say that this group of people was doing exactly that.
Yes.
They were their own school today. It was really beautiful. The school is suspended right now because of COVID. I need to say that up front. And we really don't know when we'll have another session until we see how things go. But in very simple terms, it's just the 3 days with people in that lovely feeling, exploring who and what we really are, and doing that together in a room here in Salt Spring. And it's true that Salt Spring's a pretty nice environment to do that in. There's no question about that. But then again, I've been feeling like that through the course of this call, all these beautiful people. Right?
Yes.
So it's bad marketing, but you don't have to come to Salt Spring to get that feeling. But it is really lovely, and we look forward to when we do start again. And the Three Principles Foundation will announce it on the website once we see when that's possible again. In the meantime, I've got to tell you, I've never been more grateful for this technology. Never, including hanging out on Christmas morning with our grandkids and watching them open their presents. But being able to do things like that and see clients, it's a different world, but it's still beautiful. You know, it's just absolutely amazing that we can do this.
I often wonder what Sid would think, us all in our Hollywood squares.
You know, he got to do a little bit of that before he passed. Now, there was a corporation, I won't go into the details, but
we haven't got time to tell that story.
Well, I'm not going to tell the whole story.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't have time. I'm just saying there was a corporation that had the wherewithal to do kind of something like this before this was available to the general public. So he got to try that a little bit. And he would love this, honestly. He would absolutely love it.
Yeah. I think for all that are here and the people that have shared, my feeling is very warm and fuzzy. And I just feel a sense of peace. And I thank you for sharing and coming. And I call this a labor of love. The Chipmans came out of their beautiful feeling for this message and for all of you. And so I'd love you to turn on your mics and say anything you'd like to say to them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Really
you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Very grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you.
grateful.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
Such a treat to meet you all.
Thank
It's been wonderful.
absolutely. And thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
I'd like to leave us all with a little thought is you came here because you saw something, heard something, or felt something in whatever message it was that came to you. And my hope is that we can spread that ripple and share this message in a greater way. So whatever way you show up in your world, I know that that ripple will be continuing. So thank you for
Thank you.
all my love to you, Jan and Chip, until we meet again next week. And yes, they are continuing. Thank you very much to the community of the Three Principles. We will be having Friends of Jan and Chip, which they know, which is Dr. Linda Pettit, Dr. Amy Johnson, and we'll be having Susan Marmot. And there's a few others that are on hold, waiting for commitment dates. So it's going to be a larger conversation, and I just am so blessed, Jan and Chip, that you have come to share with us this message. So
wonderful.
Yeah, thanks to everybody.
It's been joyful for me.
Yeah.
I know that. Thank you.
It's a great way to kick off the week.
Yeah. Lots of
Yes,
everybody stay safe and healthy and have a wonderful 2021.
Yep.
You too.
Bye.
You too. Thank you.
love everybody.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You leave?
Should we leave? Huh? We'll leave?
Bye, Marty. Bye. Bye, Judy. Bye, Rosalie.
Bye.
Bye, Sam. Bye, my lovely Karen. Bye, my lovely Karen. Bye, Gabrielle. Bye, Ray Joan. Lovely to see you. Miss Meg. Miss Meg. Mwah. Miss Jane, you hadn't had your camera on all day. Where are you?